What's going on, guys? Welcome to The Corner. I am your host, Colin, and this is our first official video of the 2025 season. Listen, we have college football going on. We have the NFL, we have MLB, we have the NBA, and nobody's really talking about college basketball. And we want The Corner to be the one-stop shop to where you can find all content related to college basketball. Listen, we had an exciting offseason. We had Bruce Pearl retiring. We had a number of different scandals come out with a number of different mid-major universities. The college landscape has officially changed with NIL and the transfer portal, but it has all led up to today. If you were up with me at 8 o'clock this morning, you know that Queen City played against Winthrop. Winthrop won the game, but it just really was a snowball leading up to tonight where we had an absolute heavyweight of a fight to open the season. So you had Arizona, number 13 in the country. They took down the defending national champion, the Florida Gators, 93-87 in the Vegas Classic. And let me just tell you, this had all of the ingredients for a college basketball classic. So let's just dive right in. So Florida came out swinging. The Gators opened up with a 12-point lead, and they hit 11 of the first 16 shots. You could really see the offense humming. It seemed like there was no difference between last year's team and this year's team. The only difference was really Walter Clayton Jr. for Boogie Flam. And so with last year's team, we saw that the offense was very reliant on Walter Clayton Jr. And so naturally, you would think that the offense was going to be the same way just around Boogie Flam. But a new player has emerged, and that's Thomas Haugh. And Thomas Haugh is one of my favorite players because he has ascended every year. And he finished, with 27 points. And that 27 points was very dominant. He was an absolute force inside. He lived around the basket, and he hit 12 or 14 from the free throw line. And I think moving forward with this team, I think their success is going to be derived by Thomas Haugh's success. But it wasn't just one player. You also had key contributions from Xavier Lee, who scored 14 points. You had Alex Condon, and you even had Michael Handelgitten, and he both chipped in 11 points. And so it provided a lot of big-time balance on their roster. Where last year's team, you were kind of relying on one player. Now you have 5 to 6 deep that you can rely to get double-digit scoring. And I think for attrition and for health standpoints, I think going into March, you need players that can score the basketball. And so this big-time balance, I believe that even though Florida lost, you could see that the defending champions hadn't missed a beat. But going into the first half, there was a couple of things that I noticed. I was more worried about Arizona. I was like, how is Arizona going to compete with this front line? I thought Florida was too big. I thought they weren't going to be able to match up well with Florida's bigs and be able to make enough plays offensively to keep up. I thought it was going to be a blowout initially. But then we saw that Arizona started to flex, and we saw what made them special, and that's defense. So the Ivan kid, I'm going to butcher the name, but tell me in the comments how to pronounce his last name. But the Ivan kid, he, despite an injury, he set the tone defensively. He got up into guys, and he helped flip the tempo. And so the turning point actually came in the second half. We saw that Arizona began to clamp down on Florida's guards, and they forced a lot of tough jumpers. And the Gators went just 5 for 16 after their initial burst. And then you saw why this Wildcats team had a lot of hype in the offseason and why they're built for March. I believe that one of Arizona's secret ingredients is defense. Their ability to guard is going to transition to what helps them to have easier offensive plays, help them to make plays on the other end, and help generate a spark and absolutely flip the momentum just like tonight. So, but that's the macro view. But let's talk about the micro view. And the micro view is one guy, Koa Peat. So if you've read any of my articles, you know that I was very high on Koa Peat coming into this season. I believe that Koa Peat, he was billed as a star, and he delivered every bit of that hype in his college debut. He finished with 30 points, 11 for 18 shooting, 7 boards, 5 dimes, and then he hit back-to-back dunks late, and it absolutely threw the arena into chaos. And a lot of times people say that a dunk is just worth 2 points. And I would argue and say, no, it's not. And you could see just based on that game today, when Koa Peat caught that lob and he dunked over that center, I believe it literally shifted the momentum of the game. We saw that in the final moments, Koa Peat gets a defensive rebound. He gets fouled, and he calmly knocks down both free throws to ice it. And if I had to name who is the game changer, who's the X factor from both of those rosters, I think 90% of that stadium would say that guy with the fro, Koa Peat. And you could just tell he just looked like the pro out there. And I think that if Koa Peat continues to play like this, it won't just be Big 12 champions and Final Four runs that you make in March. But I think Koa Peat can easily compete for that Wooden Award. And this really is going to set the course for what he is in the lottery and what he is in the NBA. But in addition to Koa Peat, you also had Jaden Bradley. Jaden Bradley provided a huge veteran presence for that team. We see that he popped off of 27 points, including 11 of his Arizona's last 18 points. And it's the kind of guard play that you need for close and late games in March. And we see that it wasn't just Jaden Bradley or Koa Peat, but in the same way that Florida had a well-balanced team, you saw that the role players on Arizona stepped up as well. You have Anthony Delorso, you have Tobe, and a couple of other guys who were actually given good minutes for Arizona's team late. They gave Arizona the toughness that was needed, and they gave a little bit of versatility when it comes to different matchups. That their team is not necessarily the biggest or the tallest, but I think that their team is one of the most versatile teams in college basketball. So it allowed them to play 1 through 4 effectively, and in the pick and roll, they weren't on an island. And I could argue that was one of Florida's problems last year. And so I think with that versatility, they can easily compete in the Big 12, and I'm excited to see what this Florida team does. So now let's talk about the losers. So what does this mean for Florida? I think we saw the ceiling. We saw that the Gators can put together runs. We saw that they can feed their bigs like they did last season, and they can move the ball when they're clicking. But the second half was our reminder that you need those second side creators. You need perimeter shooting against elite defenses, and you were missing a Walter Clayton Jr. And I think that was the difference between Florida's team last year, and I think that's what's missing with this team this year. 25% from three isn't going to cut it against the best. The SEC is going to be brutal. We know that even with Bruce Pearl leaving, that you still have Auburn, you still have Tennessee, you still have Mississippi State. You have a lot of teams that can play defense. And it's not a crisis for Florida. I think Florida can still score, but it's a note. And I think that in these first initial games, I think that teams can develop. But I think that certain things like shooting and identity are the things that we have to note going into conference play, after they finish these different classics and out of conference schedules. And so one of the things that I think Florida needs to do is they need to evolve their half-court offense. There were a couple of possessions where it felt like it was one-on-one ball, and it feels like their offense wasn't together, especially when they were flustered, especially when Arizona began to make changes. And I think they have to get more out on the wings and keep developing that bench, right? Championship DNA, as we saw from last year, it's going to be built on your depth. We already know what the core can do. But the question is, with the guys that you brought in on that bench, how can they produce? Can they give you quality minutes in order to win games late in March? And I believe that starts with reliable shooting, because we saw last year that it wasn't just Walter Clayton Jr., it's also Will Richard. Will Richard is in the NBA playing right now, but he was the one that gave you that 3-and-D presence. He was not only going to guard your best player, but he was able to knock down the three. And I think that the lack of two-way guards is going to be one of the Achilles heels for Florida. And so they have to focus on developing those guys this year. And I think for Arizona, you got to buy stock now. I think a lot of people are going to be talking about BYU. A lot of people are going to be talking about Kansas. A lot of people are going to be talking about Duke. But I think for Arizona, they can compete with every team that I just mentioned. I think Koa Peat looks like a legitimate star. And we see that with Koa Peat's stardom, we know that as a freshman, he's bound to make mistakes. And I think those mistakes are going to be covered up with Bradley's leadership. The leadership is obvious on the court. And I think that veteran presence is needed in order to counterbalance attacks from different star teams that they play later on in the season. And so I think even with Ivan, that Ivan brings a lot of the grit and shot making that I believe travels, especially when you're going to Iowa State, especially when you're going to Texas, especially when you're going to BYU. You need that shot making ability in order to stay in games. I believe that, like I said before, the versatility, that switchability, pace, and that kind of roster depth is necessary, not just to win in the Big 12, but to win in March. And I believe that this is a statement win. I believe that a lot of times when we talk about, these first couple of games, it's important for the winner, because the winner can say that we went, to a neutral site and we beat a heavyweight opponent like Florida. And it's one of those culture wins that I think that they have they have the understanding of what it takes to win these kind of games. And so this is a statement win. I'm a huge fan of Arizona. I'm excited to see what they do in the Big 12. And I think that this was not just a big result for the rankings, but I just really feel like this is a confidence builder that can make a long season and a Final Four kind of run. And so when you circle games like this, I think with this kind of shot making, in-game adjustments, and true NBA futures on the floor, this was everything you want as a college basketball fan. I think that every lineup was clicking. The coaches were working. Literally, it felt like a game of chess. And so I think for both teams, they're in a good position. I think that there'll be national storylines all the way to March. I think that if you missed it, please find the replay, because I think that this is one of the games where you'll be looking in March trying to bust your bracket and trying to, win your league in terms of your brackets. And you'll be trying to figure out, how these two teams fare out in whatever divisions that they are in, the North, South, East, or West division. And I think games like this can help tell a story of a lot, because I'm excited to see how Boogie Flan develops. I'm excited to see how Thomas Haugh develops, because for Thomas Haugh, he could hide behind Walter Clayton a lot last season. But now he's going to be looked at to get that 19 to 20 points a night. And he's going to have to be a centerpiece of the offense. I think that when you think about Condon and a lot of their other bigs, they're kind of just there for bodies. But I think Haugh is there not just as a big body, but he's also there for offensive production. And so with that loss of Walter Clayton Jr., I believe it's going to be important for him to step up along with Boogie Flan. Boogie, this is why they brought you in. And I think that he made tough plays around the rim, but it's going to be necessary for him to have that consistency in order for Florida to go far in March. So I'm excited. I love this game. And I think that, this went exactly like I thought. You can go check the articles I had. Arizona with the +3.5. I knew that they were going to cover that spread. And I just thought Arizona was a good team. A lot of it came from my belief in Koa Peat, and Koa Peat came to produce. But Jaden Bradley, he definitely shocked me today. And if Jaden Bradley can play like that for the rest of the season, I think Arizona is definitely a team that we should be looking out for.